Hi everyone, I'm John from Office Ready. In today's tutorial we're going to be taking a look at one of the most popular software packages on the planet, Microsoft Excel. So this tutorial is for those who are new to Excel or maybe coming back to Excel after a break. If any of you have seen my videos before, you'll have noticed that I like to try and keep them into small bite-sized digestible chunks, so I've chopped this tutorial up into two parts. The first part is we're going to have a look at how to work with rows and columns and look at some of the basics around navigating your way around a spreadsheet. In the second part we'll take a look at maybe adding some basic formulas, working with totals, formatting columns, that kind of thing. So we're going to start off nice and gently and hopefully you'll learn something new. So the first thing to mention here is that I'm using Excel 2016. However, everything I'm about to show you is backwards compatible to earlier versions of Excel. If you don't have the latest version, I do recommend you upgrade because there are some quite nice new features in the latest version of the software. Now straight away we can see that our columns need some attention. Some columns are too wide and others aren't wide enough, and we can address this in a number of ways. The first way would be to position the cursor between two columns, and you'll notice when I do that the cursor changes. It's got these little arrows pointing left and right. If I now click and hold the mouse and drag that column over and let go, I've now resized that column, and if I scroll down I can see that actually I've probably made it a bit too wide because there's too much space. So I can do the same, go between the columns, wait for the cursor to change and then drag that in a little bit and let go. And there we go, that column has now been resized nicely. And then I could go ahead and do the other columns in turn. However, that can be a bit tedious, particularly if you've got quite a lot of columns to format. So Excel has inbuilt a nice little trick to allow you to automatically resize all of the columns perfectly in just a couple of clicks. If I position the cursor between column A and row 1, you'll notice this little triangle. If I click on that, Excel will select the entire worksheet. Now if I position the cursor between two columns, and it doesn't matter which columns I choose because the entire worksheet is selected, if I double click now, you'll see that Excel has automatically resized all of the columns to fit the data that it holds perfectly. The other thing you might want to do is size some of the columns to be exactly the same width. So if I want columns B, C, D and E all to be the same width, all I need to do is highlight them, and to do that I've just clicked on the column headings at the top and dragged it across. With them highlighted, if I now position the cursor between any of these columns, the cursor will change as it did before. Then if you click and hold the mouse and drag it over, then when you let go, all of those columns will now be resized to be exactly the same width. Often when you're working with Excel spreadsheets, they can contain multiple tabs. These tabs are known as worksheets. An individual Excel file is called a workbook, and then within a workbook you can have worksheets. So here I've got sheet 1, and then I've got another one here, and another one, and another one. Now this particular workbook has quite a lot of worksheets, and I can tell that because I've got these 3 dots here. Now that's called an ellipse, and that's telling me that there are more worksheets than it can display over to the right. And if I click on the ellipse, it goes to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and so forth. You can move between these worksheets by using these buttons or just clicking with the mouse. But what I find is more useful, particularly when you've got a lot of worksheets, is if you right mouse click down in the bottom here where these buttons are, all of the worksheets that were contained within that one file are displayed. So if I want to jump to the very last worksheet, which is stock, I can just click on it and click on OK, and it jumps straight to it. You may want one particular worksheet to stand out, and you can do that by adding a background color to it. So if I go back to, I'm going to click here on my active worksheet. If I right mouse click actually on the tab itself, one of the options is tab color, and I'm going to select a nice bright color from the palette, and now that worksheet's got a nice bright background which jumps out at the user straight away. If you want to rename any of these sheets, you can do. So this one's called sheet 1. Well, I'm going to call this sales data. So I'm going to double click where it says sheet 1 and just type in sales data and press enter, and then that's now been renamed. The last thing I want to show you in this tutorial is how you can lock certain rows and columns, so when you move around the spreadsheet you don't lose those column headings. So for example here, this first row contains my column headings, and if I scroll down I've now lost the first row and I now have to guess what these values are. Well, what I want to be able to do is when I scroll down, I don't want to lose that top row. So there's an option on the ribbon for that. And if for those of you that aren't familiar, this toolbar at the top with all your options in is called the ribbon. One of the ribbon options is view. There's a button there called freeze panes. And if I click the little down arrow here, there's an option called freeze top row, and if I click on that you'll notice there's a horizontal kind of indicator that that top row is now being locked. So when I scroll down I don't lose that first row, and I can actually now see what this data relates to. You also have the same for columns as well, so I'm just going to go up to freeze panes and select unfreeze. If I wanted to lock that first column, when I move over to the right, I don't want to lose that column. So again, I'm going to come up to freeze panes, select freeze first column this time. I've now got a kind of vertical indicator, and as I scroll across I now don't lose column A. You're not limited to locking just the first row or the first column though, so if I come up to freeze panes and I'm just going to unfreeze, I might want to freeze the top 5 rows, for example. So to do that, if I highlight row 6, i.e. the one below, come up to freeze panes and select freeze panes, you'll notice that horizontal line is now down here. So when I scroll down I don't lose those top 5 rows. And it's the same with columns as well. So I'm going to go up to freeze, unfreeze. Let's say I don't want to lose columns A, B and C, so I'm going to highlight column D. Go to freeze panes and freeze panes. There's my lock indicator now, and as I scroll across I now don't lose columns A, B and C. You can also have a combination of two of both locking rows and columns at the same time. So let's demonstrate that. I'm just going to take that freeze away. Let's say I want to retain the first 2 rows and the first 2 columns. So I'm going to click on the cell below where I want to freeze, horizontally and vertically, come to freeze panes and select freeze panes. You'll now notice I've got both a horizontal and a vertical indicator, and when I scroll across I don't lose columns A and B, and when I scroll down I don't lose rows 1 and 2. So I hope you found that video useful. If you did, you might want to check out the second part to the tutorial, and if you like that, then why not subscribe to the channel? I've got a ton of great stuff for you. Feel free to leave me some comments in the section below. I really appreciate your feedback. Let me know what you like, what you don't like. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.